Hello, fellow hitchhikers. Today we are looking at a piece of Lacrean lore from the Lacrean Faction. This is all related to the Solarbots metaverse and realm. The story is told from the point of view of Sal. Sal is the friend of Enta. Enta is the father of Princess Sarah, who prefers to go by the name Princess Yani. And Enta is married to Yana. And so I kind of wonder if Yani maybe means daughter and Yana means mother. I'm not sure if there's some sort of history of words there or if I'm just interpreting that from the similarities. Now, Sal, who is our main character or our main narrator, he got to know Enta, Yanni's father, back in the younger days during the Presence War. So I've got that down as a bit of a marker for a timeline. So a generation ago, there was the Presence War, and there was a bit of a tradition there that Sal and Enta did. Enta taught Sal to kiss every round before he fired it off in battle, as sort of an honoring of the ammunition and whatnot. So they go way back. In fact, Sal, our narrator, has a long scar down his neck from a saber that happened in the Battle of the Presence War. After the Presence War, and at some point, they ended up moving up to a mountain. The Lacrean Empire seems to have a lot of mountains around it, and they lived at Sensory Peak, or at least the name of the mountain is Sensory Peak, somewhere on there, near Rockbound Lake. And they had a meager homestead. They weren't very wealthy by any means, sort of living hand to mouth. Yana, if you can describe the mother, Yana, she had short hair, used to be black, and it's snow white colored, and she was known for being able to skin Riley cats with her bare hands. So Enta, the father, would catch the Riley cats, and Yana would skin them with her bare hands. She had piercing blue eyes and a very strong opinion, and would talk a lot in a very commanding, authoritative way. She was fearless. She would jump down into holes with a knife in her teeth and in the pursuit of bears. So we have this very strong woman who is also very concerned about not being noticed. There's a bit of a common theme of shadows, both in this section of lore and the section of lore for the Ilska Guards. And Yana wanted to just cast a small shadow, don't be seen, and survive. Enta, the father, is a rather jolly fellow, does drink a lot. At the beginning of the tale, is suffering from some sort of sun sickness, and it's causing his mind to go and have some troubles just with communicating and handling life. Now, we do get a sense that these people are like humans. Everything seems to be humans. And there's also some unique animals and some similar animals. There's references to wolves, there's references to bears. But there's also an incident where Yani, the daughter, who becomes princess, is fighting a dam breaker, which I take to be a sort of a large cat with her bare hands. And she just... even though she's small framed and she has long black hair, she's born poor. She seems to have this just change the rules attitude. Not that she's so much cavalier, but she's not afraid. She's willing to cast a bigger shadow, which is sort of foreshadowing, if you will, to the end of the adventure in this section, where she sort of rises to her new position of power. Now, inside the Lacrean Empire, there is an urban center of sorts. They have, shops with medicine and whatnot. And there doesn't seem to be any room for people that aren't loyal to a faction. You kind of are part of a faction or not part of a faction. They, the religious center of the Lacrean Empire sends out some missionaries, if you will, sort of in quotation, to head up into the mountains and essentially capture these people that are living up there, these poor people. At this point, when the missionaries come out, the father, Enta, had already lost his mind to just to this sun madness. It seems to be like when you're exposed to the sun, it burns, and eventually you kind of lose your mind and can't handle it. And he ends up shooting himself, which causes Yani, the daughter, to just really be hungry for revenge, but unsure of where to direct her revenge. Her mother ends up killing these missionaries that come out with a shovel. She slowly loses her mind as well and dies, and so it ends up just being Yani out in the woods with Sal, kind of like an uncle figure. Yanni's already changing at this point, where she's sort of angry at the sun almost, because it seems to be some sort of sun sickness. At this point, we get a sense that Sal himself is starting to suffer from this sun sickness. More people, some Lacrean agents, kind of like a police force, a paramilitary religious force, covered in tattoos. Body modification, tattoos, piercing is very important within this Lacrean Empire religious cult order, if you will. They come out and they're able to handcuff and take Sal. They cut Yanni's hair, which is a horrible moment, and they start tattooing her, or she starts allowing tattoos to happen. We don't have a full sense of exactly what happens, because Sal is our narrator, and Sal starts to lose his mind more and more in this situation. These agents, the Lacrean agents, they have this expression, live the word, and it's kind of this edict or oath that they live by within their religious zealous. Yani, it kind of embraces what's happening. She starts to do her prayers faithfully. She does the schoolwork. She's almost finding herself being indoctrinated, but it's in a way that's within her power. As Sal continues to try and fight, or at least fight with his mind, he calls them mind riots, he sees this transformation happening within Yani, or he thinks he sees. It's hard to know what's hallucinations and what's not. At one point, the savior scribe comes in and jabs a needle into Sal's neck, and it's hard to tell whether or not this is to harm and hurt Sal, or if this is some sort of cure for the sun sickness that's tormenting him. But either way, Sal is fighting and desperate for his life, and is at this moment that Yani breaks the savior scribe's neck with her bare hands, kind of a reference to her mother breaking or skinning the cats with her bare hands. Yani kills this scribe with her bare hands, and then she proceeds to take a tattoo gun and tattoo the savior scribe that she has just killed. This scrolling text that goes across the top of the web page is the Lacrean Empire font, and it's a transliteration. So there's a difference between translation and transliteration. So each of those symbols corresponds to a letter from the English alphabet. And if you scroll down in the section of text here of the Ascent, basically the first half of this text: though I failed in life to give thanks for the flesh that clings to my bones, I am grateful to Mother Lacrea for warming me with my own blood and the acting out of her glorious cradling through these red-stained scratches. My wound shall not scar over, but my existent scars are the echoes of her birth pangs. I give thanks to my Savior, Princess Yani, Sarah, the divine reflection of the dear mother. So she's putting this on the body of the savior scribe, and effectively declaring herself to be kind of divine ascent, of royal noble blood. And the color red is very important within the Lacrean Empire. This actually is a good moment just to jump over to another piece of the Lacrean Empire's lore, where we learn about many centuries ago of a priest that was driven into the hinterlands or up into the mountains for blasphemy. And while this lone priest is out wanderings, comes across an old abandoned church and discovers what would become known as Lunar Ruby. And this is where we see so much red within the Lacrean Empire. And this Lunar Ruby, he discovered, would grow every full moon. It made him sort of reignite his faith and realize that there's sort of a supernatural realm going on. And he went back to the harboring citadel. So this would be, I think, a center point of, or at least a critical point within the Lacrean Empire. It goes back to this harboring citadel and brings this gemstone, and this gemstone leads to all sorts of ultimately destruction of their society, because there's decadence, embezzlement, just all this wealth that they depend on and can use. So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. It ended up being able to give them the finances in order to be a very strong military power. So the mountains are very important in a way for providing the spiritual stone that would be eventually we're going to see is going to be used for the Solarbots, but also just for protection, I think, from other areas. At least that's what I suspect. And it goes on, it says, I shall not be buried, but embraced by a flame of purification, that I may see my karmic mistakes burned away in forgiveness and rife in smoke. The glorious reflection saves me in my final moments and grants untold mercy. The word is my supper, and the water that stakes my thirst. The word is, the word was, the word shall ever be. I pray in the name of Princess Yani. Sarah, live the word. So she's basically equating herself equal to a god or a demigod at this point. Some biblical references in nature there. This is the ascent of Princess Yani. She goes from being this small-framed daughter in a meager homestead whose mother is desperate for her not to cast a large shadow. And at this stage, she ends up casting a very large shadow as she takes over effectively the religious order of the Lacrean Empire. And at the same time, we see Sal, whose mind becomes clear. He no longer has the mind riots and can now function as the savior scribe. So she promotes Sal. So these two people who come from the woods, the mountaintops, now find themselves, at least it appears to be, in charge of the religious zealots, effectively sort of holy army of the Lacrean Empire. I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of the Lacrean lore that's been shared so far, and helps you just have some pictures in your mind of what is going on. I will go through any of the other lores as well and share them as little videos, but in the meantime, keep track of your towels and don't panic.